stoppages and the sudden flow of hundreds of thousands of ballots into one center, radically altering the result, is not normal. They know intuitively that putting hundreds of thousands of ballots in the drop box and not telling how those ballots got to the counting center breaks the chain of custody of the ballots and calls into question the legitimacy of the ballots. All of this knowledge has resulted in recently, if we can move the slide, this poll was given to us just yesterday. A Newsmax poll that shows that a majority of Americans believe that there was fraud in this election, despite the censorship. If you could move the slide, and you look at 9% are unsure. That means they have questions about the election. If you combine that with those who believe that there was fraud, that's 54% of Americans, contrasted with 45% of Americans. A majority of Americans believe there was fraud in this election. And let me tell you, to call into doubt this election, you don't have to prove fraud. That's a media concoction. You have to prove that election laws were violated. And that has been admitted to by officials. We can move the slide, please. This is how the mainstream media is reporting this evidence, amid false claims of election fraud. Amid false claims, that is a pretense in the mainstream media before any report regarding the evidence, the admissions, the testimony of witnesses who say that there was fraud, say they participated in fraud, say they were trained to commit fraud, and election officials admitting they violated state election laws. Despite that, if we could go back to the screen, this precedes all reports. Amid false. That is a lie. That is a media lie. And Americans deserve better, and they demand that journalists live up to the proud heritage of their profession. I received a phone call from a reporter from the Wall Street Journal who asked me this question. He said, Mr. Kline, how can you criticize the election process? You shouldn't criticize it. That undermines democracy. I laughed. The lifeblood of democracy is open discourse. The lifeblood of democracy is debate. The proud profession of a journalist is to criticize where government goes wrong. Every citizen in this nation has the right to stand up and proclaim criticism of its government. It is stunning to me that a member of the journalistic profession would say we shouldn't criticize the manner in which government conducted itself. That is stunning to me. Would we have ever uncovered Watergate? Would we have ever revealed the excesses of government in interning Japanese Americans? Would we have ever improved ourselves to the current condition where we recognize that not only men, but women, as well as those with different skin color, have inherent and intrinsic rights to be protected by government without criticism of the government? That is frightening to me, this push towards cultural hegemony that asked us all to shut up because criticizing the process undermines the process. No. Not in America. Maybe in the former Soviet Union. Maybe in totalitarian governments. Maybe in those who want to hold on to power at all costs and don't want to reveal the truth. Maybe that criticism is valid from those persons. And what we see today is government managing itself in a way, unfortunately, that punishes criticism. I'll get to a little bit more of that in a little bit. We can go back to the slides. The media. The media has had a false narrative all through this election. Not or to do everything possible to avoid it. Let's talk about some evidence. To believe the media's portrayal that there is absolutely no evidence, I have to first explain the concept of evidence. If I showed up, as an investigator, and I oversaw the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, if I showed up at your home and I had a search warrant for documents that I believe revealed that you committed tax fraud. And it was a hot summer day, and I'm outside your home, and suddenly you board up the door, you don't allow us to come in, and I see smoke coming from the chimney. That's evidence. That's a pretty darn good conclusion that you're burning the documents so that the evidence will be destroyed. That is evidence, by the way. To believe what the media has to say, you have to believe that election officials confessing that they intentionally violated state law is not evidence of a problem in the elections. These admissions are found in every state. In Wisconsin, they admitted that they did not require identification on those who were indefinitely confined, and that they did not check if those persons who were indefinitely confined were actually indefinitely confined. Instead, they ordered election officials to accept the claim, contrary to state law. Drop boxes, contrary to state law in Georgia. Mobile ballot pickups without chain of custody, contrary to state law in Pennsylvania. The way that they cured ballots in Pennsylvania was contrary to state law. And courts have found this, by the way. They have found this to be true. Additionally, in Michigan, the manner in which they removed Republicans and the manner in which they cured ballots. And we'll speak about that more, and we'll get express details as it relates to these violations of law. So to believe the mainstream media, you have to believe that a confession is not evidence of what the person confessed to. You also have to believe, we can go to the next slide, that a box is a human being. You have to believe that a box is a human being. Let me give you an example. I testified before the Wisconsin legislature recently, and I testified after Mr. Knudsen, who's a Wisconsin election official. And he said, I know that the law says that we must deliver absentee ballots to the clerk, but what does that mean? What does clerk mean? Could it mean somebody that the clerk appointed? Or could it even mean a drop box? Now, you have to look to the purpose of the law. The purpose of the law is where the law lives and breathes, and the purpose is clear. Delivering an absentee ballot to a person, rather than an inanimate object, allows the person to verify the legitimacy of the absentee ballot. So, a person is not equal to a drop box. That is an admission of a willful and intentional evasion of the law. If I walked into this room and I had a gun, and I don't, by the way, and I pointed it at somebody's head and pulled the trigger, and I said, oops, I didn't know what a gun did, who amongst you would believe that I am innocent of shooting that person? A drop box is not a human being. It's not a clerk. It is an inanimate object without the ability to make sure that that ballot that is cast is one that is valid. To believe the mainstream media in this, and I've pocketed mine, you have to believe the next slide, please. Oh, here it is. You have to believe that the earth is the definition of place. Let me give you an example. Michigan law says that the place of the counting shall have present members of both major political parties. Remember that I said transparency is prophylactic to fraud. If you're not transparent, you can't prove the fraud. And what is happening in Michigan is the law allowed them to take ballots that could not be fed through the scanner because the paper, all military ballots were printed on the wrong paper in Michigan, because somebody might have torn it or they had a coffee stain. And allows what's called election inspectors to look at that ballot and then fill out a new ballot for this person who's not there. Cast it and count it. So they're casting votes for people who aren't there. That's why the law very wisely says both parties need to look at it to make sure it's done properly and sign off. And so what Michigan did in Wayne County is they formed a counting room. They consolidated it for the first time ever under Zuckerberg's plans. And they had 134 counting tables in a room the size of 2 football fields, and they said, we complied with the law. A Republican was in the place, he was in the cheap seats, or she was in the cheap seats, and they couldn't even see what was happening at the tables. To believe that's not evidence of fraud, you have to believe that when the legislature passed the law saying the Republican must be in the place, they actually meant any place on the planet Earth. Clearly, that's not the purpose of the law. Clearly, that is an intentional violation of the law. But it gets worse. Michigan is under siege. Michigan executive officials are now using the power of government to threaten those with whom they disagree with. Bringing this evidence forward not only gets you the mockery by the mainstream media, who refuses to report it, it now gets ethics complaints filed against you if you're a lawyer, where you have the Attorney General, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the state of Michigan, tweeting that those who bring these lawsuits need to be investigated ethically. Now, we've talked about the importance of a public discourse in a democracy. That doesn't allow public discourse. That is a chilling of public discourse. That is asking lawyers to put their fear above representing their clients in legitimate litigation. That is wrong. And I'm stunned that the Bar Association and other organizations of professionals in the legal community have not condemned